Jeff Ogilvy survives Wingfoot.
Now the moment Aaron Badley has waited for.
Gary Webb is the 5-time Australian Open champion.
Golf at its best by one of the best in golf, Peter Thomson.
Stand in front of a crowd like this today and win the Pga Championship is pretty special.
He's done it at last. Greg Norman.
Matt Jones gets his name on the Stonehaven Cup.
Leishman to 11 under. Now we've got a new leader, kids.
There it is, Adam Scott, a life changer. Coming up next, you have unrestricted access to golf across Australia and the world. Thanks to Golf Australia, we're going inside the ropes. Subscribe now on iTunes or your favourite podcast app, or head to golf.org.au.
G'day everybody, welcome to the show. It is Inside the Ropes, episode number 49. Big show ahead. It's been a significant week in Australian golf with the passing of Peter Thomson. His son Andrew Thompson going to join us on the show a little bit later on, as will the CEO of Golf Victoria, Simon Brookhouse. We touched on last week's program, the announcement that the Vic Open has extended its tenure at 13th Beach for 4 years. Prize money's gone from $300,000 in 2013 up to $3 million for the next 4 years. It is a tournament heading in all the right directions. A lot to talk about before we get to both of those gentlemen. Martin Blake joins me again. Hello, Gazelle.
G'day, Andy. Good to see you.
Looking forward. It's been a big week, hasn't it?
It has. Yeah. It wasn't a shock with Peter. You know, I think everyone in golf had heard. I think I mentioned on the show a few weeks ago that he wasn't too well. Yep. So he's a ripe old age. He's had a great innings, and he is a all-time legend of Australian sport, not just golf. So it'd be great to hear from Andrew, his son, who is actually still grieving and has to go through the service on, well, we're recording this on a Tuesday. It's Thursday at the MCG.
Yep.
Andrew Thompson himself is a lawyer based in Japan. He's been a minister of the government of Australia. He's a very impressive person himself, so looking forward to hearing from that.
There's a lot of Peter Thomson stories to be told. Mike Clayton, as I say hello to you, I don't think they'll all ever probably be told, will they? He's lived a life.
There are a lot of them.
Yeah.
Yep, there are a lot of them. But there are some great books about his life. Peter Mitchell, the Channel 7 newsreader, wrote a great book about Peter 20 years ago probably. And
yeah.
Josh Slattery's doing a third reprint of A Life in Golf, I think, the second.
Yeah. So he never wanted to write a book, did he?
He never wanted to write a book, no, but he wrote a lot.
This is part of the kind of humility of Tomo.
He wanted to write a book, but he wrote prolifically. Probably no golf professional ever wrote as much as he did. He wrote columns for The Age for years. He wrote forwards for books. I mean, almost every golf book in Australia that came out was a forward by Peter Thomson. He wrote chapters for Jack Pollard, Golf the Australian Way. There was a series of books in the 70s. He had a couple of chapters in that on the mental approach to golf.
He didn't want to do an autobiography, is what I probably should have said. But I think that Steve Perkin pulled together a book with him, which was a lot of grabs of his writing. And Andy, his writing style is exactly the same as his own personal style, which is very cutting and biting and, you know, sharp and very direct. Jeff Slattery, the publisher of that book, Clates, just correct me with the name of that book, the Steve Perkin book. It's called A Life in Golf.
A Life in Golf. But
it's a very
the original one
book.
was a red book that had a different title, but
I think it was really, really good. But Steve just pulled together a lot of collections of what he did, and it's very good.
So we look forward to talking to Andrew about that. It's not really the most appropriate jumping off point, and I'm sure it's not the biggest issue in the world of golf this week, but probably best to go to you, Clates. Can you please explain what Greg Norman has been up to in the last 5 or 6 days? What the hell has the man been doing?
Well, Nick Faldo did the most appropriate tweet. Just why?
What?
Why?
Well, it's a men's health magazine, so it's a health, the Golf Digest Men's Health edition, or I think I'm right. I couldn't.
ESPN is it?
ESPN, men's. Yeah, so it was all getting a bit scrambled. I couldn't get past the imagery. Everything else was a bit scrambled thereafter. But
the juxtaposition of those two things,
it's extraordinary.
The fact that Peter Thomson died and Greg Norman got his gear off. I'm just sort of. Can you get your head around that at all?
I'm almost thankful Peter never really saw those images. It would have been the
that's
ultimate
very
disappointment. It's like, is this what the world's come to?
Oh, yes,
I must say, Andy,
yes,
I wasn't really covering golf when Greg was at the height of his career, I was probably chasing around the cricket tour. But I've been told by several people that Greg didn't mind getting the kit off. He was one of these guys that sort of wander around the clubhouse, behind closed doors. Certainly, would that be true?
I never saw it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Well,
I guess if you had a body, the common refrain.
He is
very
fit, isn't he?
Yeah, well, that's right. If I'm, how old is he? 70?
63.
60. He's only 63.
Yeah.
Oh, if I'm looking like that when I'm 63, I won't have many clothes on as well. I'd want the rest of the world to see just how good I look.
No,
also,
you wouldn't.
You don't think so?
No.
He does spend a lot of time getting himself right, doesn't he? I mean, I'm not sure what else he's got on in the world right now, but
he spends a lot of time. He said in his Australian Story interview that he had no ego.
Big pardon?
That he had no ego.
They left that in. Oh, there you go.
He's... Anyway.
Yeah, no, well, okay. We'll get a wriggle on. That was an awkward sort of starting point for the show. Bubba wins again. He's won 3 times now since changing balls. Everybody's trying to complicate this. I know the boys and girls on the Golf Channel are starting to pull this thing apart to its nth degree, trying to analyse why he's rediscovered the game. But could it be that simple that he's gone from the Volvic ball back to the Titleist? Could it possibly be as simple as that?
Well, it's the only explanation, isn't it?
Seems to be pretty straightforward to me.
Fell off the world when he moved to it and went back winning when he went back to the other ball, to the Titleist ball. So, I mean, it's not a... Well, I have played with it. I played one round with it once. And
the Volvic?
Yeah, it's not a great ball, you have to say.
What does it do?
Well, it just doesn't feel any good. Oh, look, that's unfair. I mean, I played one round. I just didn't think it was as good as a Titleist. I mean, Titleists make... I was going to say Titleists make and have made always the best golf balls. All the golf balls are pretty good now. I mean, I would defy anyone to take a TaylorMade, a Callaway, a Bridgestone and a Titleist if they were blank and tell the difference.
What sort of golf ball do you hit when you swing at 125 miles an hour? What's the ideal?
And you've got to move it around. You want to shape it as much as he does. I mean, you've got to try. There's got to be a very specific relationship between that player and the ball he uses.
I don't know. I mean, I've only ever played with a Titleist. Well, that's not quite true, but it's pretty much since I turned pro in 1981. Apart from 1 year I played with Dunlop, because Dunlop made a great wind ball. The DDH was a great wind ball to use in Europe. But Titleist pretty soon caught up. I mean, they've always made great balls. But they're a great marketing company too. I mean, they're out there. They're there every week and they're hanging the balls out and they're paying guys to use them. And I mean, if no one was paid to use a golf ball or a golf club, my suspicion is the majority would play with a Titleist ball and a set of Mizuno irons.
Okay, right. Yeah.
Jeff Ogilvy wrote a piece in the Golf Digest, Clayton, I'm not sure if you've read that yet, about Bubba Watson saying that he's a misunderstood genius. I think, if he was a slightly different personality, he'd be immensely popular, because to actually watch him play golf is incredibly good. I mean, he's a one-off. The first time I saw him was down here at Huntingdale in the Masters a few years ago when he was a young guy, and he made a gig of himself on the last day, carrying on, and, there was an issue over what his tee time was, which group he was in, and Andrew Langford Jones for the tour had a terrible trouble with him. He was an upstart. He was an idiot in a lot of ways, but having said that, I've never seen anyone shape the ball like that. He was hitting big draws that particular day. I reckon 30-metre draws, unbelievable.
Did he lose the playoff that week, or
he was in the last group? But he arced up about.
He did, because they do the draw differently here than America, and he assumed they were going to do it the same way. And he thought he should have been in the last group, and he was in the second last group or something.
Correct, and then he arced up about it in the end, and a particular Australian player had to step aside and let him go into the last group because he was carrying on so much.
I didn't realise that.
Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Who was the player?
He might have had a few issues himself, this particular guy.
Robert Hellenby.
Yeah, maybe.
I remember the new Coolum, when they reshaped the first 6 holes of Coolum.
Yep.
The first is that par 5 with the water down the left.
Yep.
but you'll know the numbers better than me, Clates, with a bunker out on the right off the tee, about 240 from the tee.
Yeah,
and on the Saturday was the President's Cup year, so they're all out here playing.
I've never played that.
Yeah.
I've walked around those new 6 holes. I've never played them, so I don't know.
I can't
them that
imagine
well,
they'd be terribly high on your.
No, well, when Clive Palmer's destroyed the place,
no,
so
it's a tragedy.
apparently,
yeah, well, yeah,
allegedly, is that what you're supposed to say?
No, I think it's true. I think that's
there
a
are
fact.
weeds in the bunkers,
But
supposedly.
he was playing with a great friend of ours, Marcus Fraser, who's at the other end of the spectrum on the Saturday when it comes to how far they hit the golf ball. And Fraser hit his 3-wood, played at a genuine 3-shot par 5. 3-wood just out to the short of the bunker on the right, lay up, and then the little creek carry to that green. So he hit the 3-wood out to the bunker, and then he was away. And then Bubba, who's clearly left-handed, Fraser's right-handed, when he pegged his ball up, he was shaping to hit it 90 degrees in a different direction from Marcus Fraser. And I'm not kidding, it was close to 90 degrees in a different direction. And I always looked at Fraser, and he kind of looked at me, and we sort of went, what's he doing? He hit a draw, a low, ropey draw over the water, like took it down the water and sort of drew it back onto the fairway. It was impossible to get the actual yardage for their second shots in. But Fraser's like, I'm going to make it up. He was like 315 to the pin to the hole with his second shot. Bubba was like 130 to the hole with his second shot. It was almost a 200-metre differential remaining with their second shot on the same hole. Such was his ability, not only to smash it, but to... Because he wouldn't have played that shot had he tried to shape that shot right to left. He would have been bringing the water into play. But he's so confident of draw. And let's say he's hit it 320. I swear to God, the first... I would have taken 30 metres to get it to the water, but then it would have carried 200 metres. It would have been hovering over the water for 200 metres. It was ridiculous, the shot he played. And he did that all day. Like, he only beat Fraser by a shot on the day.
He plays like a savant, really.
It was. That's exactly what it was.
It's very unusual and fun to watch, and he's clearly a different cat. Really.
So he shot 63. He shot 30 on the back nine, which is nearly holed out on the last hole with a wedge. He's always hitting a wedge, isn't he?
And here's
everyone's not hitting a wedge into every hole, but it's getting a lot closer to everyone hitting a wedge into every hole than it's ever been before.
He gives 200,000. You actually have to do a double take sometimes. He wins 1.26 million for winning the Travellers. That was his check for winning. Sometimes you actually have to remind yourself that
the majors are getting up towards 2 million.
Yeah, which is that's an obscene amount of money. But to his credit, he gave 200,000 of it to the tournament's charity, the Hole in the Wall Gang, which do summer camps for kids that have got physical and intellectual challenges. So. I think you're right, Blake.
He tries hard. He always rates slowly in those anonymous surveys of tour players as to who they like and who they don't like. He's always down the bottom there.
He's fascinating to watch play. Have you spent much time watching him kind of get around a golf course?
Not really. I was in Augusta the year he won. The year he hit that. It was amazing. When you go to Augusta, you walk up and down that hill so many times. He and Louis went down the 10th hole. And we were by the 18th green, and you could see the TV monitor in the television tower. We thought, we're not going down that hill another time. It's just, and of course, that was when he hit that ridiculous wedge out of the trees. He hooked it, 50 yards?
60 yards.
Yeah, what a crazy shot. So we watched it on TV from 100 yards away.
But then you go and stand where he hit that, because we know it's so famous. Like everyone talks about the Mickelson shot on 13, which was ridiculous.
Through the trees,
But then you look at where, if you ever go to Augusta, stand where
I've done
that shot from. You cannot believe
I was there that year, and I got to play the next day, so we went into those trees. And a lot of people have said to me, well, how come he had a clear lie and everything? Well, there's no rough at Augusta, so he obviously had to hook at about 35 metres, I think it was.
Yeah, a right-hander could never play that shot because you can't
you
slice it. Well,
you couldn't
Seve
slice
maybe Bubba and Seve could, but
so
I just sliced the ball that far. But you can hook it, you can rope hook it.
Yeah, well, I remember
with a wedge
he came in for his press conference afterwards. He said, "Oh, well, that's my shot," But at the time, he was hitting a lot of hooks. That's my understanding. Nowadays, he tends to hit more of a cut, but. He said, well, that's my shot, so I just hit it. But he had to fire it out at the TV tower.
That's crazy stuff.
I mean, if he doesn't hook it, let's say, it's just dead. He's gone. Yeah.
Bryson DeChambeau is being investigated.
Oh, with the compass, yeah.
Yeah, so he's been doing this
compass
for 2 years.
protractor? What are they?
The compass. No,
compass.
So he's got the yardage book.
The compass as in
like an
not a
old-fashioned
directional compass, but
needle-
the thing in the school with the needle in
yeah,
it.
one of those things with the two pointy ends that that you see him used to use in the kind of wartime. So he's got the compass in the third round. They've seen it on the tally, and he's using the compass to locate the hole,
the exact location.
position of the hole, and he's manoeuvring the compass over his yardage book. Has it really come to this? Like, is this?
Well, that's him, isn't it?
He's out there trying to be different, isn't he? Really?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the rules. I was just reading about this earlier, Andy. Like Rule 14.3. You can't use any artificial device or unusual equipment, or use any equipment in an abnormal manner. So, I mean, maybe it's against the rules. I don't know. It's just Bryson being Bryson.
Are the USGA coming up with a ruling on it, or
I believe they've been asked to. I think the tour has asked the USGA to tell them what to do.
I'm not sure it's helping him that much. I mean, it can't be that. He's still getting the ball.
You think what would Peter Thomson say about that?
Well, Thomas, another great line. He watched a young player on TV. I was watching once go through the whole exercise of pacing off and getting the book out and writing the notes in the book and pulling the wedge out and knocking it to 30 feet. And he said, and with all that information too. Which was another great line. It was, it's so, with all that information too. I mean, Peter would stand there and look at it and take a wedge out and go, and he would knock it in there 6 feet away with. He was contemptuous of yardages, really, which are, of course, a part of the modern game, and they've helped players play better, I think. But what they've done is beaten out of everybody the concept of using your judgment. When we were kids, you would play a practice round, and the question always was, what club did you hit, or what club do you think it is? Now all you ever hear is, how far is it?
Well, you talk about playing the game on the ground all the time. With equipment and track, like you've all got a track man now on the range, they don't worry about what's between them and the hole. They just need to know the number, and they hit it in the air. That's what they do. They don't try and shape balls onto the fronts of greens anymore and run them.
But when they get on the links of Ireland and Scotland and England, I mean, yardage is irrelevant. It's on a windy day at St Andrews or Canusian.
It's making a rash generalisation. It's the issue with the US Tour is that everything is so much the same. The fairways are the same width. The rough and the grass. The grass and the rough is the same height, and it's higher the further you go in, and the greens are the same speed every week, and the bunkers have got the same consistency of set. So it's very much a formulaic. When you go into McDonald's, you get a McDonald's hamburger, they're all the same. Yeah. Well, the tour courses are, as a generalisation, very similar in setup. So when you go to a Carnoustie, as they'll do in a couple of weeks, to the Open Championship, yardage can be 200 yards can be a 9-iron, and 140 yards can be a 4-iron.
Yeah. So good luck. You can get a yardage if you like, but it's not going to help you.
So the players with the greatest, the skill to judge a shot, to judge the weight of a shot, and the force, which was Peter's great strength, to judge the weight and the force of a shot, how hard to hit it, how fast and hard to make the ball go through the wind, and where to bounce it, and how to make it run. And that's the beauty of playing on courses that are more interesting than the week-to-week PGA Tour
They can
course.
still do this, though, can't they? These guys are good enough to play those shots if they...
Well, yeah, of course, absolutely. Yeah. But the courses are not asking them that question.
Yeah, right, yeah.
The courses ask a very one-dimensional question.
Yeah.
As a generalisation. I mean, we saw
it's a really fair...
Trinity Forest a few weeks ago, which was a much different test. But you watched the course in Hartford last week. It's indistinguishable from what happens at Bay Hill or at the Kemper Open this week, or it's all pretty much the same sort of golf they play.
Did you watch any of the BMW International Open?
Yeah, Scott Henn had a good run at that, didn't he? It was quite extraordinary what happened to him on the last day, because I turned on the telly to watch it, Clates, and he was tied for the lead through 3 days. I turned on the TV, and he's already 3 shots behind before he even started the last round.
Well, there were 6 guys 3 shots behind, weren't there?
So Torbjorn Olesen shot 61 and had finished. So poor old Hendy steps on the tee, and he's got to pick up 3 shots, and he wasn't able to do it.
And he did in the front 9. He got 3 under to the turn, and then he hit his drive on 10 on the cart
path or something. Did you get a bad bounce off a cart path? Somewhere?
Yeah, he did. So took double there, I think, and he sort of hung around. He'd only been beaten by 3, so it was a really judging. I don't know whether Scott Henn has always been like this. I always thought Scott Henn was a pretty grumpy old bugger, but he's become really
engaging.
Yeah, with particularly with social media.
Yeah, he has.
And he's been, he said, I don't know where this came from. I'm wrapped, great host. So I'm happy to sort of take this form and I'll launch.
His
dress
sense
and we'll see
is
where we go.
kind of interesting.
Yeah, well, he's not shy when it comes to that. At least he keeps his clothes.
But the real revelation of the weekend was that bloke in Korea.
Well, we're going to talk. Can we talk about him later?
Absolutely, we can talk about him whenever.
Choi.
Yeah, how about
because he could probably shape as a rider. He could probably shape that ball out of the pine straw on 10, if anyone can. In fact, you're talking about him now. He played the Korean Open, finished 5 under, misses qualification, but he was in the mix the whole way.
Qualification for the top two players.
Tell me this.
Open.
I've seen one video of him hitting a crazy shot, almost like Happy Gilmore style, swinging himself off his feet. But does he do that every time or a lot of times?
No, not every time, but there was a lot of it, and very animated and emotional, and he was terrific. He was kind of bizarre to watch. Weird,
he's great.
Never seen anything like it.
If you're a tournament, if I'm Trevor Herden, I'm getting him down the Australian Open. Yeah. I am saying if there's a spot here for you.
And obviously he can play as well.
He's shot 5 under. He's in the mix. No, that's right. He's in the mix the whole way, so he can obviously play. But it's just great to see. And this is probably why the Bubba thing, we're sort of caught between the two. Because you want to see players break the mould. Because the mould is so established in the modern game. You love seeing players do it a bit differently.
So many players swing the same now. It's that.
They dress the same. They wear the same visors, the same caps, the same shirts, the same bags. Anyway, so you see this bloke and he's one right out of the box.
Is there a place for blokes to go back and dress in the polyester and hard collars of the florals of the 70s?
I like the hard collars. They're a bit too big, but
can someone pull it off?
Colour TV has got a lot to answer for, because if you get on YouTube and look at some of those 70s, did you ever get around in any of that gear? Even the great Jack Nicklaus. I mean, some of the stuff.
You're a bit of a high panter, weren't you? You hitched him up a bit too high.
Stuart Ginn was the one guy. He was the most ridiculous of them all.
Yeah.
But he was the only one who pulled it off. He was the only one where you look back now, and as outrageous as Guinea was, he looks fantastic. Guinea pulled it off. The other guys look ridiculous now, but Guinea could pull off the high fashion stuff brilliantly. I mean, he's a good-looking guy, great head of hair, but he wore the craziest of clothes.
Who was he? Was it not Peter Terravani? There was an American guy out here who...
Mike Calandro,
who used to do a bit of that as well.
Yeah, but Guinea pulled it off. Guinea was a great fashion player. Yeah. He was the best.
Had the hair.
And, of course, Payne Stewart saw Guinea playing up in Asia in the +2s or +4s.
That became his signature.
So Payne Stewart copied Guinea. That was where he got his stick from. It was
his brand, wasn't it?
Yeah. We'll get a break out of the way. Andrew Thompson about to join us. Just the LPGA Tour.
Yeah.
There's a name I think if we didn't know about already.
I did know about it, funnily enough.
You did?
I did.
Tell us about
Nasser Hatuaka is coached by Gareth Jones, who used to be in the Australian system.
Well, okay.
So Gareth Jones was the sort of national coach for South Australia, and he went over and started helping out the Japanese elite amateurs, of which Nasser was one. So she knows all the Australian girls, and he's now her coach. And how good was she? I mean, she shot 63 in the last round. It's her first win. I believe she's 19 years old. I mean, unbelievable.
I think she won the Japan Open as an amateur.
At 17.
And then didn't play any good on the LPGA for... She even went back to the Tours. Either way, she didn't play very well the first year out there, but she's played much better this year and capped it off by winning.
Didn't look like she was a power player. Looked just precision irons.
Yeah, good. Good technique and good player.
Well, she finished tied 10th at the US Women's Open 3 weeks ago. She's had 4 consecutive top 10 finishes leading into this, and she blew them away. She started, she's ended up beating Minjee Lee by 8, and they both start. Minjee Lee finished tied third. She's beaten the field by 6.
I didn't watch much. It's funny how you draw the conclusion that low scores, not much of a course. I didn't watch the course, so I can't make a reasonable comment.
Didn't see enough of it either.
But it just when you see so many low scores,
that's in 3 rounds too.
Yeah, to what
20,
they shoot
21 under or something.
Can't
3
be
rounds.
It can't be much of a test.
No, it didn't look that.
Which is not a comment on her golf at all. But anytime the shooting scores that low, it's a bit of a pitch and putt joke.
So they've got a major this week. Women's Pga Championship. So Minjee Lee coming off, she's had a win earlier this year. She's been knocked over by Lydia Ko in a playoff, a bit unlucky there, one of the great shots we spoke about. And then third this week, she had 2 really good rounds, then third round, couldn't hole anything, struggled, fell behind Nasso. She was playing in the same group, but she'd be pretty much primed and hasn't won a major yet. It's the missing thing from her resume. Maybe this is the week. That's up north of Chicago this week.
She's one of the best players out there now, isn't she, really? She's
absolutely. She's in the top 10,
tour.
and she deserves to be,
Kemper Lake's famous for, speaking of Payne Stewart, that's where he won his first major.
Oh, is that right?
Is that where the Kemper Open used to be held?
No, but he beat Mike Reed, who bogeyed, I think he finished double bogey par maybe, and Payne buried the last.
Beating by one. You're going to say
by one. Mike Reed was going to win all week and finished up not winning, losing by a shot.
Yeah, that hurts. We'll get a break out of the way. Andrew Thompson's going to join us on the other side of the break to remember his dad. You're listening to Inside the Ropes.
Hi, I'm Minjee Lee, and I'm proud to be an ambassador for MyGolf, Australian Golf's national junior program. One of my favourite things about coming back to Australia is seeing all the kids getting into golf. MyGolf is every Aussie kid's first step on their golfing pathway. It's all about fun and friendship, learning golf and life skills in a safe and healthy environment. So, if your child is between 5 and 12 years old, be sure to find a program near you at mygolf.org.au.
G'day, my name's Bob Shearer, the 1982 Australian Open champ. When you're listening on the radio, listen to the ropes for all the news and scoops coming up.
Welcome back to the show. It's been an amazing week in world golf. We're about to be joined by Andrew Thompson, the son of Peter. But to you two fellas, before we get to Andrew, the recounting and the storytelling and the sense of the impact made by Peter Thomson, Andrew's dad, it's been the global outpouring of respect that I've detected that's come Peter Thomson's way has been something to behold in the last 7 or 8 days.
And rightly so, of course, yeah. I think, it's difficult. It's so long ago, the great deeds that Peter performed are in the 1950s to 60s, etc., as a player. So that's a long time ago. So, there aren't too many of his sort of peers as players around to talk about it. But obviously we have people like Clates, and Ian Baker Finch spoke about it because he mentored him and stuff like that. So you do get a sense of it.
The biggest name, we spoke on radio the day of Peter's passing, the biggest contribution to Australian golf, but how big a contribution to the global game do you think Peter made, Clates?
Well, he played for pros other than himself, I always thought. He started Japan and Asia, and he was the main guy in Europe and Britain when he played. So he gave those tournaments and those circuits, legitimacy, really. And he was the big star, and he turned up and he played, and he wasn't getting paid for it when he could have easily gone to America and made more money. So he was the father of the world tour, really, I think. Greg Norman gets some credit for his idea, but that was Peter's idea long before Greg even thought of it. So I think when you talk about Australia's greatest players, it's not only what they do on the course, what they do off the course, and the contribution they make. And he's far and away above everybody else when it comes to if that's the measure, I think.
It's certainly one of the measures, isn't it? It's one of the measures, absolutely. Andrew Thompson is the son of Peter, and he's been good enough to join us after what's been an extraordinary week in terms of the conversations that have been had about your father, Andrew. Condolences to the family, and we appreciate you coming along for a chat. How do you, as you look back on the week that's been, what sense do you get for the way that your father was regarded by the global sporting and golfing community in particular?
Well, that goes back a long way. He was 88 when he died, 16 over par. So he'd been crook for a while. So it wasn't a surprise. But it's very broad where these tributes and kind words have come from, of course. And Britain and United States, lots of country golfers in Australia, Japan, China, Malaysia, Hong Kong, pretty much as Michael said, wherever he roamed and enjoyed himself playing golf or making friends, people have remembered him quite clearly. I suppose, you'd say he's a person you remember clearly if you had something to do with him.
Can you tell us the sort of how he'd been in the last couple of months of his life? What sort of how he'd been travelling?
Well, he was losing, with the Parkinson's disease, he was losing movement, and he was losing a bit of coherent thought from time to time. But through the fog of it all, most days he'd have periods where you could talk to him and he wouldn't respond at great length, but he knew what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And even going back a year or so when Arnold Palmer died, that was, about 12, 14 months ago. He was pretty crook then, so I was back here visiting, so I went round to see him that morning when Arnold's service was being broadcast on TV at great length, and I thought he might need a bit of cheering up. So I sat down and said, "Oh, Dad, Arnold has passed away, and he was a month younger than you. Imagine that, he's gone first." And Dad looked at the TV and said, "He was always in a hurry."
Andrew, what was I'm interested in Peter's sense of himself and his sense of his greatness as a golfer, because I heard Mike Clayton say the other day that I think he visited the home quite a few years ago and there was no memorabilia around, not too many trophies or trinkets or things like that. He kind of had this life outside of golf, didn't he? But what was his sense of his own greatness as a player, do you think?
Well, he saw it as a game, a sport and a living that he could make from it. So he was more interested in what sort of golf clubs were sitting in the corner in the garage and what people might be using out on the tour. And he was a Scotsman, so he didn't like a cluttered place. He liked a simple sort of surroundings. So he had the memories of it, and he didn't talk at great length ever about this sort of thing. It was harder to get any comment from him about golf really at any time. He had a particular thing about, I guess, me as his son. He didn't want me to aspire to play professional golf, certainly as a young child.
But did you inherit that beautiful rhythmic swing in any shape or form?
Well, the odd moment. But you have to remember I'm only half a Thompson.
You're a 9 marker, aren't you?
Yeah, my mother, the Kellys were not golfers. They were good people, but they weren't golfers.
Let's not hold that against them, no. Why was that? Why did he ever explain that to you? Why he didn't want you to follow in the professional playing footsteps?
He thought it was a gambling life. He not in the sense of laying bets, but he thought it was very unsteady. And you've got to remember, he grew up in the Depression, or he was a young child, and I think the memories of his mother and father and the families and others sort of suffering in the 1930s, and then really even as a young teenager in the Second World War, he had a sense that life could be a lot more steady and safer. So this idea of trying to make a living and support a family from golf or other such crafts was something best avoided.
Did the game consume him? You hear a lot of stories of the great sports people of the planet who have been so consumed by it that it becomes such a quest that family life suffers and people closest to them are marginalised to a degree. Was Peter like that, or did he always maintain some kind of perspective that perhaps is lost by others?
Yeah, I think from the days playing tournaments really in the 50s through 60s and 70s, it was really only 5 hours work a day. They'd have a little warm-up and get onto the first tee. They'd play their sort of 4 hours of golf, and that was it. And, they'd be back in the hotel, and there'd be he and Guy Wolstenholme or Kell, and they'd be, thinking, well, where we have a meal, and we've got to wash our socks and underpants, and there was no team that came with you. So he developed a habit of reading a lot. He'd always have a hardback book with him, and he made friends with sort of authors, among other people along the way. So coming back here to Melbourne, he developed a golf course design practice with Mike Wolveridge, and John Harris sort of helped him start off, and then the commentary came along. So he would devote himself to those pursuits really post or during the tournament life, and then the PGA work, that was also very important. So he had a lot of other things to do other than try and win prize money.
Were you a big washer of your own socks and jocks after a game of...
Every golf pro is a washer of his...
I can't imagine you were doing too much.
But I remember reading, Peter would write about the boredom of the tour, how you filled in the time between the 4 hours that you were playing and how soul-destroying that would be. I mean, Andrew, my question would be, from my reading of what his early life was, that he chose the life of a golf pro because he was so precociously good at such a young age. It was obvious that, well, I can do pretty well out of this. But he was clearly head and shoulders above. I mean, he was a Norman, Adam Scott type talent of his time when, well, it was obvious that he could make a great life and living from playing the game because he was that much better than everybody else. And that he was so good, so young. Good enough to win the Australian Open at 21 and the Victorian Amateur 18, and clearly a prodigy, really.
Well, people told him he couldn't. Henry Cotton said, you're fooling yourself. You can't make a living from this. You've got to go back to the club on Saturday and Sunday and look after the members. They'll pay you. I mean, this tournament winnings won't feed you. So I have a sense when he was told that, he thought, no, I'll prove this fella wrong. And in some sense, that early post-war notion of a celebrity player, there were pre-war celebrities, Harrison and others.
Well, Hagen,
I suppose.
Exhibition matches, they made the money out of exhibitions.
Yeah. So, but this idea of were there enough tournaments in a year to support, a devotion to travel and this sort of thing. And as Mike said, when he chose to go to Asia regularly and see what he could do to help them get up a circuit, that really consumed him. He loved that part of the world.
What was he like as a dad, would you say? Was he a hard dad, an easy dad, or a supportive dad?
Oh, no, he was you wouldn't call it remote, that's the wrong adjective, but he wasn't the sort of father who would interfere or have much to say from day to day when he was back here. Don't forget, a lot of my young life, he was away, 8 or 9 months a year, I suppose. When he was back for the tournament season, November through to about February, which often included New Zealand, he was busy playing golf. But he was around, and he'd always come home and look in the fridge and see, we got enough milk and things like that. So you didn't have the sort of Tiger Woods team of 100 people going down to the milk bar and buying the full cream milk.
Didn't have the physio dropping around or the masseuse.
No.
He had an acerbic wit to him and a kind of a bluntness, I suppose you would say. He could be very direct with his speech at times. Was he like that with his children?
No, he was very gentle at home. If you'd say, "Oh, Dad, I think I need to buy a cassette player," he'd say, "Well, open the window and listen to the birds sing," or something like that. It's just, that's the sort of thing you'd get. We'd get the cassette player eventually, but that's really what he was like. He was a gentle sort of fellow.
And you were telling me before that he was friendly with. Well, I know that he had a kind of a relationship with Sir Robert Menzies, who shared his love of Carlton Footy Club as well. And although Menzies wasn't a golfer, but was it Ian Fleming was a friend, and he also knew King, one of the Kings. Yeah.
Well, Fleming was a very keen golfer, Sunningdale, I think, and he befriended Dad, as did Sean Connery, who sent a message the other day, about a month ago, just sort of saying hello. But Fleming made my father promise never to read a James Bond book. He said they're rubbish, such rubbish. He said the sort of books you read, I couldn't bear the idea of you reading a Bond book. And so Dad never did, never turned a page of James Bond book.
Is that right? He wasn't even tempted to stick his nose in one?
Yeah, Fleming sent him a telegram, I think after 1965 Open, saying something like, "Well done, Bond," or something like that.
The reason I asked you about Menzies was because you went into politics yourself on the Liberal side. You were a member for Wentworth for a while, and you were Minister for Sport. And Peter stood for state politics in 1982 and was beat. So was politics a topic around the house?
Oh, it was, yeah. Dad was interested in sort of current affairs, and he was friendly with Lee Kuan Yew and sort of various people like that, and so you'd sort of have it around the table. It wasn't what you'd call an ideological sort of atmosphere, but Lindsay Thompson asked him to run for that seat of Paran. Sam Loxton had held it, and then they lost it, and So Dad gave it a good 2 years of door knocking and all that. And anyway, John Cain then swept to power, and so despite a reasonable sort of swing, Dad wasn't elected, and thank heavens, because he then went off to play the seniors tour after that. So had he won,
and went okay there.
Yeah, well, you know.
So he would have been a small L type Liberal, like a Menzies style. Liberal, rather than
he wasn't a great ideologue.
Type
no. But Menzies was someone he, I think, admired, and they had a sort of a friendship through the Carlton Football Club, and Menzies would send him the odd telegram and so forth. But
and what about King Edward? You were telling me before that he met and knew King Edward.
Well, he became the Duke of Windsor, was exiled to France after the war, and he turned up at the French Open one day when Dad was playing, and Jack Galbally was in the gallery, and Jack was a very good friend, a Labor Party member of the State Parliament, and a good player. He was off about 2 or 3, and a member of Victoria Golf Club. So Dad introduced him to the Duke in the gallery, and they spent the next few holes walking together as Dad played. And when Jack got back to Victoria, the members said, "But Jack, you know, you're an Irish Republican. What are you hanging out with the royal family for? And what did he ask you?" And Jack said he asked me whether Collingwood would win the flag this year.
Of course he did. We're going to have to let you go, but how proud, you know, the son and the father, children and their parents, they look up to them. Are you enormously proud of what your dad was able to achieve in his life?
Yeah, we always were, and we remain so. But Dad always said that he wasn't the first. He built on what had come before. The professionals, Australians and others, that had been toiling away in the 30s and the post-war. So he built on that. And when he saw young players, you know, in the 80s, 90s and so forth, he did what he could to help them. So we sort of see him as part of a long and continuing tradition of especially Australian golf and golf design and good golf commentary and writing, and he was a part of that. So whatever we can do to help others draw inspiration from what he did, we'll always do that.
And last one from me, did you ever get a sense from him? Did you get a sense from him as what he regarded as the most significant achievement of his life or contribution that he made to the game? Was there one that you've got a sense from him towered above all others?
Oh, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but there was an awful lot.
Yeah.
It's hard to sort of really put a finger on one thing. There were President's Cup victories, World Cup, and of course his own victories. But I guess just an example to follow for others, that you don't have to be too much sort of yourself. You should be part of the game and the sport, and you know, not be selfish, and don't 3-putt.
Andrew, it's been a delight to have you on the show. It's been a really significant week for Australian sport, obviously a really important week for your family, and at the end of it all, we really appreciate you coming in and talking to us about your dad. We thank you for being part of the show.
Oh, you're very kind.
Andrew Thompson, son of Peter, whose mark has been as significant as any, and the footsteps will linger for eternity, I suspect. We'll get a break out of the way here on Inside the Ropes. Come back with more after this.
Hi, this is Sherelle McMahon. Swing Fit is the fun, healthy, social way for women to get started in golf. You'll learn the basics of the golf swing and how to putt over a 6-week program, and get your whole body moving through yoga and Pilates-style exercises. You don't need any golf knowledge or equipment. Simply turn up in comfy clothing and get started. You'll be surrounded by like-minded people and receive constant support. So get outdoors, meet new friends, and learn a sport that you can play for the rest of your life. To find a program near you, visit swingfit.com.au.
G'day guys, I'm Scott Hend. I'm around the world playing golf everywhere, but when I can, I love listening to Inside the Ropes.
Welcome back to the show. There's a bit to talk about off the back of all of that, but we should, before we do any of that, welcome Simon Brookhouse onto the show, the CEO of Golf Victoria. Again, off the back of a magnificent week for your tournament. Brookie, thanks for coming on the show.
No problems, mate. Thanks for having me.
We'll get into the nuts and bolts of that in a moment, but we just wanted to spend a moment. You were listening to Andrew Thompson while having a chat to him. Beautiful storyteller. Great way to remember the legacy left by Peter Thomson, his dad. That sense that you got from him right at the very end when he talked about Peter being part of the continuum, not setting himself above and apart from, you, Blakey, as a golf writer, you, Simon, as an administrator, or you, Clates, as a player and a golf course designer. He very much saw himself as just being part of it. Did that ring true to you when you heard Andrew sort of put that?
Yeah, Norman Von Nijder he really helped Peter when he first went to Britain. They shared their prize money the first year they played, and he took him around. He introduced him to the clubs and the people who would help him in his career. And he just always saw that was a part of Australian golf, was handing down the knowledge to the next generation. And he did it for Graham Marsh and Ian Baker Finch and Stuart Ginn and Bob Shearer, all of our generation. Anyone who wanted any help, he was always there. But he would make you think. The famous story about Peter Fowler, who just won the World Cup and finished third in the Australian Open, caught him in the car park at Kingston Heath and said, Peter, you've been watching me play on TV the last few weeks. He said, what do you think I should do to improve my game? And he said, shoot lower scores, Peter. And he walked off and turned. He said, that's it, Peter. He said, shoot lower scores. And Chook was so angry. You can't believe what that fucking old bastard said to me. And only years later did he realise what he was actually saying. He was making... I'm not going to give you the answer. You need to think about the answer. But, the aim of golf is to shoot lower scores. So one, he was saying, as Ben Hogan said to Nick Faldo when asked, how do I win the US Open? Shoot the lowest score, Nick. It's obvious, but it's true, painfully true. And he was also saying, stop worrying about your swing and the way you play, and just as Andrew said, don't three-putt. Hank Haney, don't three-putt. Don't take penalty shots. Don't double chip. Just get that score down. Stop obsessing with all the irrelevant stuff. Of course, the other side of that coin is that if you took Peter Fowler's swing and Peter Thompson's swing, one was the easiest motion ever in golf ever and the most repeatable, and Chook had to work unbelievably hard to make that thing work from day to day. So they were chalk and cheese in terms of how hard and how easy the game was for him to play. But shoot lower scores, Peter. Yeah. And it's such a great line. And Chook said to me years later, he said, God, he was so right. He said, if only I'd listened to him. Yeah. But he would make you think. He wouldn't just give you the obvious, sit you down for an hour and run you through it. He would just shoot lower scores, Peter.
You just brushed over something there, Clates, which I've heard you say before about them sharing prize money. I find this extraordinary, Andy.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So they actually agreed to split their money, right?
Well, when John Kelly and I turned pro, we'd won the two Australian amateurs in 78 and 79, and we went and stayed with Norman Von Nijder. Our first tournaments as a pro, we went up to Corelban and stayed with him for a week. And he suggested for our first year, we share our prize money. I mean, we didn't, but he was still talking about it. 30 years later, he was still talking about the concept of when you go out there, you share your expenses and your prize money. And it was a notion that was not foreign in the 50s, but certainly.
Who would that have been more beneficial for? Had you in your first year?
I won $40,000 in a week about 3 months later. So yeah, it would have been a disaster for me. but it might have helped John. I don't know.
Yeah, no.
But it certainly was saying to Peter, it was a bit like, in a sense, Mike Kaiser, not physically underwriting the golf course at Barnbougle for Richard Sattler, but he emotionally underwrote it, saying, if you run out of money, give me a call.
Yeah.
That was what Von Nijder was saying to Peter. If you run out of money, I'll be there. So don't worry about the money. That'll be fine. Let's just go and play.
Yeah. And
I'm sure they would have been neither. I mean, Peter was sixth in his first Open at Portrush, and I'm sure he did pretty well in his first year. And he was, he'd have done fine right from the get-go. But the notion was that, if you go over there and struggle, don't worry, because I'll be there to back you up.
I asked Andrew about Peter's directness because he's got that. He had that ability to strip the game back to incredibly simple terms. But there's a story, isn't there, Clates, about something that he said to Billy Dunk, who I think he didn't get along with.
No, they didn't. No,
didn't he put his arm around him after he beat him in match play? And I think Billy Dunk had missed a short putt. Is that right?
Well, look, it'll be an apocryphal story, but. And I don't even know if it was Dunkey, but Dunkey and Peter graded a bit because Dunkey was cranky and angry and the complete opposite temperament of Tomo and a brilliant player. But there was it might have even been Dunkey, but there was 6-foot putt that hit a spike mark and spun around the hole and lipped out, and the aforesaid player was in contusions of agony, and Tomo walked up and whispered, he said, "That happened to me once," which is such a great line because it's so true. I mean, everybody's ever played.
There's always a message there, isn't there?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And the message is that you have bad luck in golf.
You're not the only one, mate. Yeah, there was a great line. He was commentating. Andrew was talking about how he was commentating it. Obviously, he commentated for the ABC for years. He was down commentating at the New Zealand Open. It was probably 1993, I guess. The Open was at Power Pram, I think, and Grant Wade had won at Congressional that year. And his fellow commentator was gushing about Grant Wade's potential, and he was a terrific player. Great swing. And in fact, he would have annoyed Tomo because he was such a great swinger. Like, why aren't you doing better? And he was gushing about Grant Wade's potential, how well he played. He won in America. And Peter said, he said, "How old is he?" He said, "Oh, he's 32, Peter." He said, He said, "I'd won 4 Opens by then." And it was which was his way of saying, "You better move it along a bit."
Put everything in perspective.
I'd won 4 Opens by then.
We could be here. We could do a whole pod and a whole radio show, I reckon, just on these stories. And I think as time rolls on, hopefully there'll be more of them just roll out. But Simon Brookhouse is here, and we do need to get a wriggle on to talk about the magnificent announcement. We talked about it on the show last week, but the 4 years extension, the prize money increase up to $3 million, the gender equity between the men and the women, it stays where it's been at 13th Beach. How has this happened? How has this tournament that started was the mouse that has now roared? How has that happened?
Look, to be fair, I think it's the simplicity of what it is, the fact that it's become an enjoyable tournament for people to play in. And the publicity around the world in terms of the men and women every year, no matter what the prize money, has been really strong. And it helps that we've got a very supportive government, obviously. The truth is, a lot of people look at the government and say, look, yeah, Daniel's a pro golfer and pro as in supportive of. But the truth is that they support good events, and it's a good regional event, and it promotes the game, and it's well supported by the community. But more than anything else, the players love it. And I think that's the biggest selling point for it. I think when we announced a couple of weeks ago that the social media reaction, particularly amongst the players, was so positive that it really almost endorsed the decision to move forward in the way we have. It's
not only everything you say there is 100% right and deserves fleshing out, but the fact that it remains as unique as it is, despite the fact that everybody around the world is looking at this and going, that's such a great idea, we should do that. We should do that with the Scottish Open. We should do that with the Korean Open. We should do that with Opens here, there and everywhere. It's not as, and you say it's simple, but it's not. It's a lot easier said than done, clearly.
Yeah, look, I think one of the great additions to the concept for us is such a great facility.
Yep.
The 36-hole venue, the community, the feel about it and where it is. But the simplicity of it is as simple as 2 fields, mixing them up, alternating groups and what we've been able to do. However, you've got to be willing to do that. And the one thing I think we've got in Australia, particularly amongst the tours, the men's and the women's, is a camaraderie and the ability to work together. And I think the difficulty in other countries is bringing the LET and the European Tour together, or the LPGA and the PGA and the Japan Tours, whatever it might be. They're really big beasts in their own. And I think that makes it a little more difficult than it does here for us. We work far more closely together, I think, than the other tours around the world. And I think that's a positive for Australian golf and a really good sign.
How important is it for women's golf too? I mean, for women's sport in Australia, because you see it doesn't work that seamlessly in other professional clubs as this, growth in professional women's sport, particularly in the football codes, is going through this sort of unbelievable growth phase in Australian pro sports. It doesn't work as seamlessly as some people would like it to. The fact that it does work so beautifully hand in glove with the Vic Open is a credit to everybody involved.
Yeah, and I think one of the strengths of that is that the skill levels of the males and the females are very similar. They might hit the ball at different distances, but in terms of overall skill and their ability to actually execute the game, not unlike tennis and at the elite level of tennis, that helps. But I think some of the other codes you mentioned there is there is a disparity between the skills of the males and the females at this point in time. I'm not suggesting that they won't catch up. But I think that golf's been around for both the men and the women for such a long period of time now that the competitiveness and the outcomes, and you only look at our scores of every tournament we've had, they've been very close, the male winner and the female winner. So there's a bit of a parity about how they play the game together.
What's the future of this event? Because you've been building the prize money, I think, from multiplied by 10 times in 5 years, or 6 years, which is incredible. But
imagine the next 5.
Well, you're now in the area that you can possibly get onto the European Tour with the men, and possibly the LPGA with the women. I presume that's what you're after.
Yeah, look, I mean, we're certainly in fairly solid negotiations with the European Men's Tour. In fact, only last night we had a really positive teleconference with them.
But is there a spot in the calendar?
There is a spot in the calendar,
Right.
yeah. The spot in the calendar will be the week that's been announced for the tournament, which is the week before the Women's Open and what will end up being the Perth event. If that works, it'll mean 2 men's European Tour events in Australia, but there's still a bit of water to go under the bridge in negotiation there, but we're quite confident that that's the way we'll go.
219 there?
219, yeah.
Can that work? It's just hypothetically, could that work, having 2 European Tour events? Did you say on the same week?
No, back-to-back.
Oh, back-to-back,
yeah.
I beg your pardon. Well, that's brilliant.
Yeah, so the advantage for the European Tour of that is that they've struggled to get their best players to come down for one event, because it is quite a task to get down to Australia for 1 week. So they've been very keen to get a second tournament in February down here to hopefully leverage the Perth event and a Victorian-based event. So that will enable more to come down, and there's economies of scale to come down for 2 weeks, not only for the players but also for the tour.
Clates, there's a healthy rivalry. When you were coming through the ranks, the State Opens had a much greater status around Australia. I think it's fair to say than they do now. They were all most of them were televised. Great international players participated. They were sought after titles. How will it resonate around the other, state bodies that Victoria has this Open that is doing what it's doing and is on the verge of getting the status that Simon's talking about?
Yeah, I mean, arguably it's the best tournament in the country, isn't it? It's not the best title. Of course, you'd rather win the Australian Open, but arguably it's the best tournament, certainly the best event. And when it was in the 70s, I mean, the Masters only overtook it because IMG bought it from David Inglis and Frank Williams and put it on Channel 7. But the Vic Open was a much bigger event than the Masters for the longest time. But, I mean, it ought to be the portent of the revitalisation of the State Opens, which are all essentially gone. New South Wales is decent, I think. But, I mean, the South Australian Open was a terrific event, gone. Tasmania was a pretty good event. West Australia was the 1979 West Australian Open had Ballesteros, Strange, Norman, Pate, Casper, Graham, Shearer, Marsh, John
Clayton.
I was an amateur. Roger Davis.
It's a good field.
I mean, that was an extraordinary field, but it was a one-off 150th centenary event. But that was an amazing event. And then Greg came back and won that in '86 when he came back and won all the year he won the Open. He won the World Match Play and came back European Open. He had that long run of winning everything until Mike Harwood beat him at Castle Hill. But he won the West Australian Open at Karrinyup, and so they were all terrific events. The New South Wales Open, I remember Nick Price playing there. Nick Price won the South Australian Open one year. So they all. I mean, the trick is how do you revive them with the money? I mean, clearly, the Premier here has been very generous, but that generosity has been rewarded by the creation of a great event that was, in truth, it wasn't. I mean, I played the ones at Spring Valley and at Woodlands and at Cranbourne. They were okay events, but they were nothing like it is now. And it proved that if you take it to a place where the locals appreciate it, they'll do well.
No doubt. And that's what makes fits into the Victorian government investing in regional Victoria. This is stated ambition, several years ago. So it ticks that box. You want to get some bang for your buck and show it to the world, and part of doing that is getting more extensive media. Everybody at Golf Vic's done an unbelievable job in terms of making the media that you've made, but I imagine you'd like a greater media partner. And where are you at with that?
Yeah, look, I mean, the sanctioning with a European tour means that it'll be broadcast. and their distribution worldwide is around 680 million houses. And that's really important in terms of the growth of the event and for our commercial partners, and also for tourism and for the Geelong and Otway region, the Bellarine, the state government, and they're all the really positives about the event, that it is actually attracting interest and attracting commercial partners and broadcast partners. We don't sense will be particularly difficult given the unique nature of it and the feedback we've got so far. I mean, the European Tour actually approached us before we got the extra money, so it wasn't something that we went looking for. It was a discussion we had last year after the Perth Super Sixes event with them, and said, well, look, I'll go away and try and secure some more money, and then we'll talk down the track. And our team's done a great job, obviously, securing that 4-year commitment, and the state government, we can't thank them enough, to be brutally honest, but it allows us to look at expanding the women's side, and there's opportunities there around LPGA, depending on schedules and those sort of things as well, that we need to flesh out now that it's real and we've announced that the hard work's really starting. So and we just continue to try and do what we can to grow it.
The interesting thing, going back to Peter Thomson, how much he abhorred the notion of appearance money, saying that in his book that Australia's not much different from Brazil or Nigeria, really, in the fact that we pay for, call it demeaning. But I spoke to So Young Yu the other day, who's looking forward to coming to play. I mean, she said, if it works for my schedule, I'll absolutely come and play. But not a hint ever of how much are you going to pay me to come here. Right. Yeah, if you talk to a European Tour player who's someone's heard of, and it's like the first question will be, how much do I get to play? It's just the concept of women understand they need to support that LPGA Tour and go and play and don't ask for appearance money, and everyone turn up and play and support, which was Peter's idea. We need to support these tournaments and turn up and play without bleeding them dry of money out of the budget to pay for the appearance for 1 or 2 stars. So the women are incredibly good at supporting events like the Vic Open without sticking their hand out.
And I think the key to that too is they'll support something they enjoy. If they came down here, didn't have a good time, didn't have fun doing it, it'd be hard to get them back. But it's almost like a good sales pitch, isn't it? The repeat business you get's really important. But the girls particularly, we've had more international flavour on the women's side, have been the great salespeople for this event. And the Mike Wands of the LPGA knew about this event because his players have told him, have a look at this, it's great fun, we really enjoyed it and we want to go back.
Brookie, in the broader sense, Australian tournament golf, it feels like you've turned the tide here with this tournament. You're going into, everyone else was struggling. The prize money is low compared to overseas at other tournaments. Even the Australian Open's only worth $1.25 million, $1.5 million. Does it say to you and the rest of us that tournament golf in Australia can grow and can get back to what perhaps what it was?
I'd like to think so. I think that what it shows is that if you're willing to do something a little bit different, that people will buy in. I think there's enough talk around the world in the golf circles at the moment that some of the 72-hole stroke play style events are getting a bit stale and change may well be necessary. We've seen that in the European Tour with the Super Sixes and the teams events that they've had and various other things. I'm not for the minute saying we rule out 72-hole events. That is what golf is, like 5 sets tennis and these sort of things, and 5-day test cricket. There's a place for them, but I think there's a place in the world of professional golf for different styles of events to attract people and attract a media audience to it. I don't believe that we could do every tournament around the world, men and women, for a minute, because it's just not logistically possible. But I could suspect that, Clayton's talked about the state opens and the ability to revitalise those. There's nothing to say we can't look at starting on an 18-hole facility with a 72-field men, 72-field women to start to grow it. And the funding available for men's and women's equality is really important in this country at the moment. So you've got to start. I mean, my view on these things is you've got to start somewhere. They may not work all the time, but if we don't take a risk to try and improve, we'll probably go backwards.
Well, what do you think about an Australian Open with alternating men's and women's? A women's Open with coinciding with a men's Open? How would that go?
Look, I think
a lot of people think it'd be great.
Yeah, and I do too. But again, we talked about the scheduling and the different tours, and there's difficulties in that. I mean, I've often thought about it. Well, what about Royal Melbourne, East-West alternating composite course on the weekend for the men and women? It'd be really exciting is it possible? Well, it takes a bit of negotiation around the tours and the scheduling of the players, which I think for golf's the most difficult thing to actually get on top of is the actual scheduling. But you never say never with these things. And it may not be every year. You might say, well, we can do that every 4 years. To have something that's really impressive every 4 years, we'll try and do that rather than every year.
Simon, 4 years, 13th Beach, $3 million, growth happening before our eyes. It's a credit to yourself and your team at Golf Victoria that you've been able to navigate your way to where you are right now. You've mentioned a couple of times, of course, the enthusiasm and support from Daniel Andrews and his government here. That goes without saying. But the idea was germinated in your offices, and everybody involved deserves a pat on the back. Congratulations. We can't wait to be part of it all again in the next coming years. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. And Andy, that's really important too. It has been a massive team effort. It's not any individuals, and the board have had to be really supportive of this change too. So we take our hat off to all of them, willing to take the risk.
Simon Brookhouse, CEO of Golf Victoria, a landmark announcement about the future of that tournament last week. Any little general business before we want to wrap it up? We'll remind people.
Yeah, Andy,
the
British Amateur was completed the other day. Interesting winner, Ernie Els's nephew, a guy called Josen Rebula from South Africa. Ernie Els's nephew.
There you go.
And David Micheluzzi from Victoria, who was the star of the interstate teams. He's the reigning Vic Amateur champion and Master of the Amateurs champion. He got to the quarterfinals, which is a pretty good effort. I think he's going to be, he must be turning pro pretty soon, David.
Yeah, you assume. Although he's young, there's no hurry. They want to rush out there in a hurry because they.
Well, the Ryan Ruffles example gets thrown up there, doesn't it?
Yeah,
because he went very early. I guess he'd sort of done everything, but he went very early, and now he's kind of struggling.
Well, you can say that, but
it doesn't bother you, does it?
Say, well, what did he want would be the question. I mean, Ryan's a terrific player. I've seen him play some beautiful golf, but I just wonder. I think every year you get out there pre-21 years old is a year you lose at the end of your career because you're worn out by. I think there's a lot to be said for not jumping out there too
and
early.
Just the stuff you miss out on too, Clates. You miss out on a bit of stuff, I reckon. Just growing up time and
being out on the tour at 19 is not. It's not the great place to be at 19. I don't think.
So Andy, was there a Roger Bannister this week?
There is one. Yeah. I apologise if we've already put him in there. I didn't have the complete file, but we celebrate Roger Bannister's speed, the first man to break the 4-minute mile, and we juxtapose what Bannister did against some of the blokes who were ruining the game. And JB Holmes, I apologise if we've already put him in the file and didn't have the records of that, but he was disgusting at the Travellers. It's not just over one or two shots; it's just about over every single shot now. When he gets over the ball, he actually hits it, but it takes him forever. He twitches. He readjusts his grip. He sort of has waggles. He has practice swings. He gets behind the ball. He checks out the line. He gets back. He waggles again. He talks to his caddy. It's actually no good. And I can't believe they don't call him.
Well, my question is it OCD? Is he kind of got the disease where he actually can't pull the trigger? I mean, I've got sympathy for blokes who have that, where you actually just can't get to walk in and hit it. You get so tied up in knots.
Like that's what it looks like. It can't be any good for the blokes behind him. Like in case he sort of bogeyed 16, 17 and played himself out of the tournament, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he was in the group behind JB Holmes. It can't be much fun if you're trying to get into a rhythm.
You're waiting on every shot.
Yeah, and you're sitting there with your caddy. You're aware of it because you can watch it. You can see it from 150 metres away. You know what's going on.
I mean, so he's obviously not going to go and play in Austria in the
shot clock would
tournament.
Not be very good for him. Well, look, they should enforce the rules, shouldn't they?
Yeah,
they should enforce that.
Yeah, absolutely. Jordan Spieth's taking a break before Carnoustie. Just for those who are interested in it, his last 6 or 7 weeks have been poor by standards. He's missed a couple of cuts, no top tens, which is unusual for the career sort of bio of and trajectory of Jordan Spieth. So,
ironically enough, he seems to have lost his putting.
He does.
Which for a guy that this time last year would have said he's the best putter in the world.
Where did he finish up last week? He shot 63 the first day, didn't he? I didn't see
good. No.
But I mean, I think if you
something
like he's a terrific player, but if you live by the putter, you can die by it if it goes away.
So his remedy is a bit of time off. So He'll be back for the Open. I'm not sure what he'll play before it. Don't forget, if you're new to the podcast, you can subscribe on Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts from. Play 9. Blakey, you've been talking about this the last couple of weeks. You get the chance to play the same course, same week of the Australian Open.
At the Lakes in the Australian Open.
Which is awesome.
Just get your club. If your club is not involved in this, go and ask them why not, because it's very easy. You just enter the competition and the club. Any club can do it.
You get to go to a couple of functions as well and play at the Clayton renovated Lakes.
You might only want to play 9 if you worn out after 9 holes.
Don't listen. I think it's a much better golf course.
I think they're going out on the front 9, which
the front 9's
it's got a couple of unusual holes. That par 4, the short par 4 with there's a kind of a heap of rough in the middle of it.
I like the front 9. The front 9 at the Lakes is terrific. Bruce Devlin, when the freeway went through the golf course in the late 60s.
Yeah.
So Bruce Devlin and Von Hagge redid the golf course, and they did a tremendous job fitting those holes into that little pocket of land under the freeway.
Yeah.
And if you do subscribe, G. Oakford from Golf Victoria, who supplies us with our housekeeping, is a big fan of the 5-star review. And if you do give us a 5-star review, he makes sure that he gets mentioned on the show. And we have one from Shazar 2802. I won't read it because it's quite long, but the name has been mentioned. And I think I'm calling someone on your phone there, Blakey. But if you do subscribe, give us the 5-star review and your name will get a mention on the show. Sad week for Australian golf. I'm glad Andrew came in today. We got some time to speak.
It was nice, wasn't it?
It was
some great anecdotes. He's a lovely speaker as well.
Absolutely. See you next week. Good on you, Marty Blake. Thanks for coming in again, Clayton.
Thanks, mate.
Mike Clayton, part of the show. We'll be back next week to do it all again, folks. See you then.